We have Dr. Scott Atlas on the phone with us now from the Hoover Institute, and he has just written The Last Word, the Stanford Review, and we wanted to get the last word from him on coronavirus. He is, if you don't know, he kind of became the anti-Fauci in a way, and said, yeah, maybe we don't have this one right. Welcome to the program, Dr. Atlas. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right. So let's look back now at what we've done, what we learned, and where we are.
Okay. That's a big topic. Well, what we've learned, first of all, there's a set of things we learned about the virus that we have known for months, by the way, and that is that it's really not risky for the overwhelming majority of people, but for elderly high-risk people, it's extremely dangerous and significantly worse than the flu. The other things that we've learned is that we know how to protect these people. We should have protected them from the beginning, but that wasn't the recommendation. Instead, the recommendation was to lock everybody down and somehow indirectly protect them. And what we learned was that was a gross failure. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died, many of whom were in the high risk. Hundreds of thousands, in fact, were in the high risk category, almost all of them, but a lot of them, 40% or something, were in nursing homes, which was the obvious target. Instead of protecting those people, the people that were in charge of implementing policy did these lockdowns. Almost the entire country, almost every governor did lockdowns, and those were the policies that were recommended by the people not me, but by the other people on the task force. So the people that are saying somehow there was a bad result that advocated for the lockdowns are criticizing what was implemented that they recommended.
Right.
They criticize people like me who decided and knew that the lockdowns were going to be a disastrous, harmful way to pursue policy. And they criticize those of us who criticize that as if their policies were not implemented. Their policies were implemented. That means the policies advocated by the people like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and all the governors implemented the lockdowns, and they were proven to be not just ineffective at stopping the virus, but they were extraordinarily harmful. And, we can see that by looking all over the world as well as our internal comparisons. So, if you want me to talk more about
well, I want to actually go back towards the beginning of something you said, when you said that we found out that it's not as deadly except for older people. You know, we've had these things before in the past. We've had polio was a big one, and we didn't do this kind of a lockdown. Can you find anything in history that you would compare COVID with that we've seen in the past and didn't destroy our economy and lock everybody up?
Well, there were previous pandemics that were very deadly, including pandemics that were more deadly to younger, healthier people. There's never been a lockdown like this before, and never. And it's obvious why. In fact, the classic pandemic preparation paper, I think, was written in something like 2009. I may be wrong about that. But that paper that is referred to as the classic way to think about these management of something like a pandemic said very explicitly that we do not lock down because of the harms of the lockdown, because of the inability of human beings to function in a healthy way with a lockdown, and it was extremely unadvisable to do such a thing. So it's never been done, and it will never, hopefully, be done again. Although I'm wary of that.
Yeah.
Because if I can say something that I didn't really finish with, which is you asked me what we learned, and I wrote this in that paper, The Last Word, because what we really learned were two shocking thing.
I'm afraid of these.
What we learned was the massive power of the government, and we never, I don't think, consciously realized that the government could shut down society, close your jobs, close your businesses, close your schools, quarantine you inside your home, stop you from seeing your own family. We never understood that kind of power existed. And the second part that we learned that shocked me even more as an American was that people were going to just say okay to that.
Yeah, that's
that passive response, that acquiescence to such an extraordinary draconian restriction on your own personal liberty was a shock to me that people went along with that, they have and continue to do.
Is it because it came so slowly? Because everybody was willing to do it, for 15 days. And then we even understood, well, we're going to wait until Easter. But then after Easter, it was kind of like, wait a minute. What? No, we can't continue to do this. And it allowed, those first two kind of allowed people to position anyone who was against it as somebody who wanted grandma to be dead.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of looking back on it, trying to figure out how this has evolved into what we have today, which is, by the way, in my opinion, a completely and wholly damaged American psyche that will potentially never come back. I hate to be cynical like that, but I have my doubts. But why did this happen? Well, first of all, of course, fear, and that's understandable. The fear that was invoked by the completely inappropriate pronouncements of the World Health Organization at the time that started this whole thing about this fatality rate that, of course, I was afraid too, this extraordinary fatality rate that was probably 50 times what it really is. And the idea that everyone, the calculations of the models that were originally in the UK, that assumed that everyone was at equal risk.
Right.
Okay, which again is a massive hypothetical error. And that kind of fear was, of course, it shows you what the impact of fear is on human beings, and that's sort of understandable. But then what happened was the media, and there's some fascinating data about this, particularly the American media, recklessly, irresponsibly created fear. They and I don't know if it was because or only because of the election year. I think a lot of it probably was politically motivated in the beginning. But I think at this point, people over several months, and by the time I got to Washington, and I didn't get there till end of July, beginning of August, by then there was a damaged psyche. This was an obsession, an addiction. The fear was not going to be overcome when no matter who won the election, and I actually, people said, oh, well, when the President Biden wins, this will be over. I didn't think so, and of course, it has not been over.
It is.
And so the fear and the fear-mongering by the media, which was really extraordinarily harmful, was the sort of ingredient.
It is extraordinary how different parts of the country reacted to this. People in New York, they're still terrified of it. Here in Texas, we're not so afraid of it. We have a healthy fear of it, and we just take precautions. But we know who's most at risk. You go into California, you go into New York, or better yet, they come here. They just almost don't even know how to be in society anymore.
Yeah, well, I live in California,
so you know.
Unfortunately. And, what's extraordinary is the fear. What's extraordinary is the complete lack of critical thinking. There's been a gross distortion of the data by the people who are the faces of the so-called public health world. But worse than that, there has been a direct spreading of pseudoscience and direct harm to the public. And we've seen it time and time again, literally pseudoscience, yet they lash out at those of us who do analyze it correctly and claim we are using pseudoscience, including my friends at Stanford, who don't understand that, for instance, the 6-foot rule that we have been living by religiously was pseudoscience. It was never scientifically
Right.
generated. The World Health Organization used 3 feet from the beginning, as did many countries, Austria, Finland, Sweden, China, Singapore. I can go on and on. There's no problem with using 3 feet, even, and not saying 3 feet the correct number, but it's an arbitrary designation.
Correct.
To say 6 feet, and now that we know it's wrong, where is the uproar? Where is the instant admission of error and more importantly, instant change of everything to 3 feet? Why is that not being done? I think this is a serious example of people having bought into something, no matter, even when it's proven wrong, they are still wedded to it. And it's relevant because that is a big difference between a functioning business, a functioning restaurant, a functioning school, and not. 3 feet is a very different number from 6 feet.
Well, I will tell you this. Also, you can't expect outrage when people will go to a restaurant and have to wear a mask while walking to the table, but then you can take the mask off while sitting at the table. That is the most, I mean, that is almost magic in its thinking.
Well,
and
it's
go ahead.
It's sorry to interrupt, but it's completely irrational. Okay, and I'll tell you why it's irrational. Exposure does not happen when you're walking past somebody. The CDC even defines exposure as being in someone's personal space for 15 minutes or more. The only time you're going to be exposed in a restaurant is when you're sitting at the table with the people you're with. You're not going to be exposed by walking to your table, yet this is the sort of topsy-turvy Alice in Wonderland logic that we use here in this country. It's completely off the rails. I can't even emphasize enough how irrational the behavior is. I mean, the biggest example is how we double down on stringent requirements in the low-risk environment.
Yes.
What do I mean by that? The schools.
Yes.
There's no safer environment than a school, yet that's where we're testing, that's where we're setting up these barriers, that's where we're not even opening the schools in many parts of the country, or even colleges. It's a low-risk environment compared to the community. It's healthy, younger people for the most part. Of course, the high-risk people, they can be protected, they can be vaccinated, whatever, but the low-risk environments don't need mass testing every single day, closure, et cetera. Airplanes are a low-risk environment. There has never been significant outbreaks of cases on airplanes. There have been cases, but the data on airplanes is not showing that it's a high-risk environment. Yet the airplanes were told, I just flew somewhere. It must be on a 2-hour flight. You're told more than a dozen times to put your mask on in between bites, in between sips. Meantime, the air filtration system on an airplane is much more effective than anywhere else. But so schools, low-risk environments, we have the most stringent requirements. This is the complete lack of rational thought going on. And again, it's an indication of a severely damaged psyche. You walk around outside in California, outside, and you'll see young people, young, healthy people who are extremely low risk to begin with, wearing a mask, alone, riding their bicycle, in their car, alone, wearing a mask. This is totally irrational. It is pseudoscience. It's like carrying a magic quarter inside your pocket.